it's just across the board that we're not understanding the soul. We're not understanding the soul and living by the soul. And I think Kerouac was so great at wanting to express the innocence of his soul and the kindness of the people that the hobos and even the cops that would stop, whatever it was, like every character, whether it was a good character or bad, are there good characters and bad characters in Kerouac books? It's not like that. He just was able to convey in the moment, in spite of the hardness of the moment, in spite of I'm sleeping on the first scene of Dharma Bums, he's on a train sleeping next to a bum. That's a painful thing. Who wants to do that? And yet Kerouac is able to sort of give us this formula into understanding compassion, into understanding sympathy. When he was on the video, the famous
Apple Knocker Radio. Okay, greetings, my friends, and welcome back to Apple Knocker Radio. My next guest is Michael Jason Sherman. He is the author of the Zen of Solo Travel. He is also the innovator of an intriguing approach to coaching and self-improvement. Inspired by the great American author Jack Kerouac, of whom I am also a big fan, Sherman helps clients devise solo road trips that take them far from home and closer to themselves. Sherman's writing and work is about rediscovering the mystery of this universe and giving us a chance to get lost so that we can find ourselves again. And so, with no further ado, here is Michael Jason Sherman. Thank you very much, my friends, and I sincerely hope that you're all doing well.
A picture of you.
There we go.
We got it. There we go.
Good to meet you, my friend. Look at these beautiful pictures of the pyramids in the background.
Well, again, you're the first person. I set this up. You're going to be the first person with this background, man.
That's awesome.
Thanks, dude. I love it.
Is that a virtual background?
No, it's real. It's my wall.
Oh, okay, good. I was going to say it looks real.
Because it is real.
Awesome.
How you doing, man?
This is my first public conversation about Kerouac, not just about my psychotherapy work, but about like how important Kerouac is to what I'm building, what I'm writing about, and all that. So this is extremely cool to me.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. It's actually your subject matter. It works perfectly for my channel because I know you. Actually, are you good with just starting this or?
Yeah, good. I'm here. We're good. I know. I'm from New York. I know how to talk. I'm good.
Okay, cool. Oh, so sometimes people like to chit chat a little bit, and then I'll do a countdown and start like the actual interview.
I am open to whatever. I'm good to go.
Okay, so to the viewers, then what I wanted to say was the way that Michael found me was through my Jack Kerouac video, and it's just funny because my channel is kind of a weird mixture of literature and like spirituality, including some really far out spirituality. And so your book just works perfectly for this, man. But
that's great.
What were you going to say?
That's great.
So how about let's start with your story of how this book came about, which it's not just a book, it's like your work, but how this all initiated.
Sure. So I guess what I'll do is since we're going on Kerouac, I'll kind of just go a little bit backstory and then kind of insert it into my work and into the book that I came out with and the book that I'm writing. Real summarized.
All right.
So when I was a teenager, I had a very traumatizing childhood, and my answer was movement. To the trauma, started with a bicycle and then led to, I lived in New York City and I was, waking up in the middle of the night, couldn't sleep, biking over the Marine Park Bridge in Brooklyn and just, 15-year-old kid staring at the beach, and because I needed to. And then that led to a lot more movement, bike tours of Maine, a bike tour of England with groups, and then by myself, traveling around Europe as a 18-year-old, and then living in England as a 21-year-old, and living in Israel as a 26-year-old, and living in Seattle from New York. All these this is just movement. It was just total movement. In my 30s, was married. I'm no longer married, but I was facing a very powerful dilemma that a lot of all of us go through in terms of the cusp of parenthood. Do I really want to be a parent or not? Is that going to destroy my marriage, of two people, committed, but really having possibly different timing about, that journey. So what happened then, and I had been studying Kerouac for years as a sort of an outlet, like a metaphor, or I felt like I was a student of Kerouac. I felt like I was really finding meaning from the road, probably more meaning from the road than I was finding from daily life, and the kind of the quality of his writing and just what he was about. And then all the other kind of authors that dovetail off Kerouac, went into a Hunter S. Thompson thing for a while, all of those sort of poetic, truth-telling, but authors about the road and authors about enlightenment and seeking and, seeking poetry and experiencing that. So I was both sort of providing myself my own psychotherapy from the road and then getting this powerful validation from Kerouac and from other writing and other film. So in my 30s, when I was facing this very big crossroads of like, if I need to find a way to say yes to parenthood or this marriage is done. And that's really what I was faced with. And I was also dealing with the presence of my late father. At that point, he had taken his life after years and years of mental illness. And so I was sitting with that inside in a very, very deep and troubling way. So at that point, what I decided to do was I'm going to use travel. I'm going to go away and figure myself out, and I'm going to do it quickly. So what I did was take a journey by myself to Japan for 10 days as this personal man trip to sort of say, Japan's going to teach me. I'm going to find a way to enlighten. I've done Aikido martial arts for years, so it felt like a homecoming. It felt like the farthest place in the world that I could go to from living as this like professional Jewish man in New York with all those traditions that we were sort of buying into. I left it all behind. I had this extraordinary experience, highs and lows, and found myself immersed in Japan, seeing 2 baseball games at the Tokyo, going to multiple Buddhist temples in a natural hot springs, just all these karaoke, everything I just got in. And it helped me to sort of say yes to all of it, to say yes to parenthood, to say yes to what would come of it, to say yes to being okay if it wasn't going to work out, which ultimately the marriage broke, but now we have 2 children, and we moved together to from New York to it was far more complicated than I'm saying. I live in California, in Arcata, California. So that trip just let everything seem possible. It just opened my mind and let everything seem possible. And then I wrote it. And this is the book, The Zen of Solo Travel, A Journey from Anxiety to Enlightenment. And I basically tried to let myself be influenced by Kerouac in his voice, in his movement, a couple of other authors that I kind of threw in there, and sort of found in my own experience in Japan the qualities of the hero's journey playing out. All these initiations, the gatekeeper, the right in the beginning of like, the guardian at the gate of the new dimension, that was there, once I was changing money, or even more so really when I carrying all my stuff in the middle of the night, way too much stuff than I needed. And the cab drivers couldn't figure out the address. They're all like arguing with each other. And I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like sitting there with like way too much stuff, realizing that the arguments of these lost cab drivers who couldn't get me to my hotel for the night was going to leave me locked out because the hotels had curfew. So I was facing homelessness in the first night after this 17-hour flight. And I'm like, my God, that was my gatekeeper. That was like, none shall pass. You have to break through this test. Right. So all of those things, sort of the Joseph Campbell, monomyth structure seemed to follow this 10-day trip and led to this personal awakening. And then Kerouac was this sort of guardian angel of this mentor author that helped me to find the voice and put it into that book. That led to me teaching my coaching clients to start designing personal solo journeys. This is back in like 2011, 2012, where out of the book writing and the Campbell structure and my experience professionally giving psychotherapeutic coaching, where one by one, I guided each of the clients to do what they could to visualize leaving everything behind, leave all the relationships psychologically, try to leave all the emotional patterns psychologically, plan a intentional journey where you're going to go somewhere where you either have some very important thing that you need to get done away from home psychologically, or where you're going into a state of wandering, where you're really detaching from everything and just letting the road be your guide and healer, as it were. And then one by one, all of my clients, really to this day, I've been doing this for like 11, 12 years, of all of the coaching clients would find their way as this sort of semi-annual initiation to go places by themselves. And what ended up happening was this incredible burst of release for each one, that we would have these incredible journeys. The first one who really bought in was this woman who still does the work with me. And she had just come to the decision, yes, I do need to leave my husband, which was a hard enough decision, but she didn't really have enough connection to her soul and what she's about. So through the therapy, we helped her to unlock this deep connection of an interest in death and dying. It was just her thing. She always had it. Nobody appreciated her about it. Nobody supported her about that. And it came out through the therapy. So she came up with this question, and it's this guiding question. How can I, let me see if I can remember. How can I be a dark fire of wisdom and bury people naturally? It was like this wild question. And that question then led to a trip that she planned with me alone. She drove from suburban New York all the way upstate near to the border of Canada. She found a bed and breakfast where the Dalai Lama happened to stay. And the next morning, she woke up and spent the day at an organic cemetery, a cemetery that focuses on making sure that the bodies are buried naturally with no chemicals and, no awful decomposition of the body. Like organic food, this is organic soil. And there's a whole movement about that. She went and found this place. She was sitting, meditating by herself in the cemetery. She stepped inside coffins and just kind of meditated and allowed herself to go into this transcendental state. She found her way inside. She asked someone to allow her to one of the workers there to step inside a grave and just be in the presence of death. Came back. When she came back to the session, I thought it was like lightning was coming out of her ears. I've never seen a client like that. She felt like she had claimed herself. She felt connected to her soul. She just had this whole movement move through her because of that experience. A couple of months later, she starts a radio show called Dying to Bloom as an advocate for organic burials. A couple of years later, she's opened a boutique called Dying to Bloom, filled with organic coffins made of gorgeous trees, just a store in suburban New York, Nyack, New York, all for people to immerse themselves in death and dying in an organic, healing, clean, spiritual way. And all of that was like geared up and ready for her, but it wasn't expressing itself in her life or in her former marriage. The trip was the catalyst. So it was like all of that became a kind of a blueprint to send client after client after client after client for years, to sort of follow the wandering of Kerouac into this state of mind that the road brings, that he writes about all the time. And so I've been doing that, teaching online retreats, I'm doing so again in August, to give people the formula to create a sacred solo. And now I'm writing another book called Healing Power of the Road, where I'm not only showing in my biography how taking solo journeys was a way of responding to trauma and taking psychotherapy into my own hands, but I actually create this fictional character of Kerouac, imagining him not as a drunk, not, like, what if he was resurrected? What if he came back? What if he is like this sort of American Christ figure, this sort of embodiment of the road, embodiment of sympathy, embodiment of healing and the moment and the aliveness of the moment. And so I throw him in there to make it, more of a biographical novel than, it's a lot of biography, but it's like a magical realist biography. And we basically follow Kerouac on this journey. Me and Kerouac meet up in San Francisco in this like fictionalized hitchhiking. And we put him in the car and I go straight true north to where I live now and have this sort of, psychological experience of the mind and reality mixed together through the road, just driving through the night, me connecting with Kerouac in this fictional conversation, and me going through my own personal awakening through the ocean, through the road, through all these things, experiences I had, but just letting Kerouac be this like guiding sort of grand psychotherapist to awaken to the empathy that the road brings. So that's like all of it.
Man, that is so cool.
Thank you.
This is something I've actually thought about a lot because Kerouac, he was really like part of a lineage, because you can go all the way back to like Walt Whitman. Like America has this artistic and spiritual foundation of traveling artists, creative people. It was always like part of the American psyche. And it seems like the last person I can think of would be Hunter S. Thompson, who kind of was the last notable person in that lineage. And then it's really kind of weird because it seems like it just died, which I don't understand because it's such a great American tradition, but
right.
I don't know of anybody today that is like carrying that mantle on, that anybody,
I think we're all trying to do our best. I'm finding my own, a lot of hurt has brought me to a lot of learning. And that learning is brought me to a place where I can allow myself to say, it's not about, oh, I'm it, but it's about the same thing you're seeing, that, where did that go? Where did it all go? And so now having one book out and having, taught a lot of people this, I've taught hundreds of people to take all over the world, so I'm going, what else can we do? What else can we do? So to sort of embrace Kerouac as this sort of guiding light of the whole thing, and to try to inspire not just like young people, which is great because there's a lot of young people out there. I live in California. People are all like, I went off for 6 months. I came back, I'm there, that a lot of that is still happening. But for me, it's more about like the middle-aged, middle-class mom or dad who's frustrated with their life. And I'm trying to say America is out there, even though there's a lot of stuff going on in our world, politically, socially, that we're having so much struggle. The land is out there. The roads are there. And if you could allow yourself to see the road as medicine and to appreciate the state of leaving, just letting people embrace leaving on a psychological level and on a physical level. And then to see we have all of these leaders or spirits, Kerouac, Thompson, Walt Whitman, this lineage that obviously you and I have immersed ourselves into whatever degree. I think it's a great time for people to embrace that lineage. I can't tell you how many people I say who I know travel all the time out here, and I go, have you heard, about Jack Kerouac? And they're like, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
Can't let Jack die, man. We got to keep educating people.
I agree. So I'm the book I'm writing. It's called Healing Power of the Road: Taking Psychotherapy into My Own Hands. It's taking a while to write. I've been working on it for like 3.5 years. It can take a little while, but I really see it as a book, and then a film. And like my whole life is just focused on slowly building it up to that, with the intention of reaching regular people who are suffering. Just regular people who are suffering. There's a scene in the book, the new one, where and this happened. So this, most of the book is true, but they fictionalize it just a little bit. So my children had relocated to California before me, and there was a lot going on. I don't need to get into it, but you can imagine your father, but any father is, that's a very difficult thing to deal with. Okay. So I was wandering a lot, and I did a solo from where I was living in New York down to the Jersey Shore, be by myself, clear my head, and let myself reconnect to who I am. And I snuck into this hotel. It turned into an all gay and lesbian hotel. I'm sitting there like, okay, how did I wind up here? One of those great moments. And I write about that in the book. So I come out of that, like with this kind of strange awareness and happiness and acceptance and joyfulness. So now from there, I'm walking on the boardwalk, and I'm filled with energy, and everybody's half naked. It's a hot summer day in New York. I'm like, wow, this is wild, all this stuff. Who knows what's going to happen? And I said, I need something to do. So on the boardwalk, there's a mini golf place. So I just wander into the mini golf place, and I'm like, whatever. I love golf, and I'll just waste some time. In front of me, there was a dad with his daughter. The daughter maybe was 7 or 8. And the daughter had some kind of accident. I don't know what it was. She had ice on her face. She was bleeding by her lip. And the father was just berating her. The father was like attacking her verbally. It was horrible. I was like, what could have happened? I'm like, did she hit the ball wrong? Is this guy like some kind of golf, perfectionist? Like, what's going on here? I ignored it, kept golfing, but my mood went down, obviously. Okay, finish golf, go back into the water, come back to the boardwalk, and I see the father, this is like a half an hour later, is still yelling at the daughter.
Holy
the daughter sitting there in public with ice on her bloody lip, and her father is criticizing her adamantly in public on the boardwalk. And so obviously it's now been for half an hour. And so I go from this high to this terrible low. And in the book, I talk about how, wow, so that girl is going to wind up traumatized. She's going to wind up, meeting the wrong boys or girls or whatever. She finds out she's going to be, have emotional issues with herself. Right. She's going to seek help. And a lot of what I'm writing about is a lot of sort of how therapy is. There's many, many good therapists out there, but there's also, it's like online dating. and you never know what you're going to get. And there's a lot of problems with the one-on-one psychotherapy that I think is going on right now. I think there's a lot of good people, but systematically, like if I wanted to get therapy out here, I'd be waiting for months and months, and who knows what kind of therapist I could get just because of the system.
Right. Yeah. Without going detail, just let me say I can vouch for that, man. So that's as much as I'll say about it. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. So I feel, as somebody who is a caregiver professionally, I feel very, very much like I need to talk about this. So this vision of the girl, I'm sitting there seeing she's going to get the wrong care for the rest of her life. And I'm watching like the moment in time.
That's tragic.
Of her traumatization. So that became this sort of fuel, like I got to do my share. And I kept walking on the boardwalk, and I started saying, like, we just got to get the people who are traumatized to learn that they could take psychotherapy into their own hands. And I'm not saying that the road gives you everything, but I am definitely saying that the road and leaving will trigger states of empathy, awakening, calmness, soothing, and let you feel your soul, let you feel alive. And then there's this whole lineage of people who are so about poetry and joy and expression and beatitude, the whole just real breaking away from the expectations of life and loving their brother and understanding their brothers and sisters. That's out there. but it's like a whole different reality that we have to cultivate. And so that moment with that little girl was an awakening moment of like, I need to do this. I need to somehow find the way to get this message across big.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. It reminds me, there was this, Kerouac once said he was talking about science fiction. I can't remember at all.
I did not know that. This is interesting.
Yeah, he just a little like statement that he made where the implication, I'm not even going to try to paraphrase it because it's been so long, but the spirit of it was, he felt that science fiction was kind of like, which is actually interesting because Dr. Sachs started getting into magic realism, was going towards fantasy. But anyway, he made this comment about how it was like, you when you stop believing in the magic and the energy of life is when you start retreating into fantasy. And I don't want to like get into that statement so much, but the reason why I bring that up is because I feel like living in this time where that lineage of the Kerouac Whitman author is dead, and outside of places like California, I've lived on the West Coast where people do still just go travel, which is awesome. Outside of that, there's a lot of people just, I don't know, it's like it's almost like people feel like there's something morally wrong with looking at life as a grand adventure and just a place of excitement and wonder and something to just fucking go on the road, man. Just like go look at this beautiful, amazing world. Like somehow that has been lost. And I love the work that you're doing, man. I think that's really, really cool stuff.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. What you're saying is true. It's really sad. I think that, and I think we've seen through the last 3 years of going through the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, that when the systems of the world get shaken, it reveals how anxiety producing the systems of the world are.
That's a really interesting point, man. That's really interesting.
And that they're moving towards more instability.
Mm-hmm.
And that people want to think about, what would it be like if I am not necessarily off the grid, but outside the corporate expectation, or outside the sort of way marriage creates a sort of societal expectation for people, or outside of the expectations of what we're supposed to feel like. I think social media reveals that constantly. You could read between the lines of what's being shown, with everybody's just on and sort of like, I went to the bathroom today. Here, great, I posted. Right. It's like all of this anxiety that's like spilling out into this like rolling, constant scrolling of anxiety and the structures of authority are not allowing for the natural state of human expression. People are deep. They're deep, and the world doesn't allow for that. Now, what's interesting from that perspective is how the program that I developed revealed that and scared people, meaning that the whole aspect of saying you're going to leave everything behind and take a trip for a while. On the simplest level, you're doing that all the time. You get in the car, you go on the highway, boom, off you go. But to consciously think that I'm intentionally doing something for myself, to claim myself, it is sort of like a horrifying, unfortunate, I don't want to say horrifying, it's an awakening moment of their depth, and that they have depth. And what's amazing is that the program revealed it. And here's one example. In other words, that when you go on a journey, and the way that I'm asking people to go on a journey, it's like leave, but take your whole energy with you, whatever you got. Okay. Like, don't make exceptions for yourself. If you are, ADHD, bring your ADHD with you. Be totally accepting of everything that you have emotionally and every emotion that you have, because you're bringing that with you on the road, and let the road sort of unfurl it and let it roll itself out into whatever it's meant to be. That's terrifying for a lot of people. Okay. So this one client, she had gotten divorced a few years before starting counseling. So she's starting counseling in that like post-divorce, who am I now? I've been so sort of associated with this other person. What do I do with myself, who I am? So I said, just do the journey and we'll do something easy. So she was in suburban New York, And I said, what do you love? She's like, art. I said, let's go on a journey, leave everything behind and go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Greek sculpture, Roman stuff, Middle Ages, romantic period paintings, get lost in New York, the soaring ceilings of it, Central Park, just go get lost, okay? I got to go by myself. Yeah, solo travel is by yourself. Okay. She finally gets around to planning it, gets in the car, and her passenger seat front tire has a flat. So the journey then got derailed, and her journey was at the tire place. And she had a great conversation with the guy at the tire place. And she came back to therapy, and I was like, okay, great. That was good. Let's do it again. She doesn't want to do it. Did once, try it again. Get to the museum. She does it again and gets in her car about 2 months later, and there's a flat tire in the left side on the driver's side of the car. Can't go. Couldn't go. It was like stunning. Like I could roll off like 20 examples of how the inner world of the client revealed itself in an outer world situation.
That's weird.
Another client, this client was a woman in her 40s, kind of knowing she needed to get divorced. So marriage and divorce is a big kind of, that was like the threshold that I sort of like, let the road kind of help you to kind of figure out where you go on that threshold. So this woman was getting close to saying yes to divorce. Didn't know if she's going to do it or not, but it was getting close. So she goes, her journey took her to New York City to stay overnight. She's Greek by her heritage. So she stayed at a hotel where she knew there was going to be this wonderful Greek restaurant right next door. Treat herself to that. Okay. And she took a bus. For whatever reason, again, it's 40 minutes with no traffic to go from Rockland County, New York to Manhattan. Freaking out. Which bus do I take? The whole gatekeeper of this is a different dimension for this person. What side of the street is the bus? Am I going to be okay? All these things happening. Okay. She gets there. She gets to the hotel. She's fine. She checks in. She goes to a Greek restaurant at night. I'm all right. I'm safe. I'm going to be okay. The next day, she's wandering around different places in New York, talking to different people, new energies, all of that. She meets a couple from out of town that, were just great conversation, and they go, we're going to go out to dinner tonight. Why don't you join us? And she goes, yeah, what am I doing? Do I do this? Is this in my realm of the kind of things I'm used to doing? So she says, yes. And she says, when do we meet for dinner? And they said midnight, because that's what people do in New York, is go out to eat really late, or they go out to the club really late. So she's like, okay, like flipping out about it.
Right.
Goes back to her hotel, chills out, goes to the restaurant at like 11:45 at night. And who comes out of the restaurant door? This is 2012, 13. Who comes out of the restaurant but Michelle Obama is getting escorted from the restaurant to her limousine. And she was right there in the moment to see Michelle Obama.
Weird.
And, that's total like, I am woman, I am strong, I was meant to be here. I needed this moment, came back, processed all it with me, and then gently started the divorce process, or the individuating process between her and her husband and her kids. That moment set it off for her.
That is wild. And that's, when you talk about the people going on these trips, a lot of it is meeting people. And it's so interesting, because just like last week, I was talking to a female friend of mine who's very frustrated with the dating apps, and just, it's not good, not meeting anybody good, et cetera, et cetera. And we actually had this conversation, because it's so weird, because it's like, dude, when we were younger, which wasn't that long ago, you would just always go out and you just met people. You just met people like actual human beings, and you can't put that magic in an app profile. Like you can't quantify those things, and you can't put them in a way that you blast out into social media. You just meet somebody and you catch them when they smile at a certain moment, or they say something, and boom, that's when you're off onto love, man, or just a relationship. And and that just doesn't happen as much anymore because people aren't getting out and getting
People
out into the
aren't
world.
talking anymore, Jeff. People aren't listening.
Right.
People aren't listening everywhere. It's the worst epidemic of all the things that are happening to
And
me.
it's so bizarre because that was just human reality for so long. And now it's like, it just doesn't happen anymore. People meet in these artificial and just dehumanizing ways. And we're all suffering for it because you can't capture the magic of somebody in a list of statistics on their profiles, right? And it feeds into what you're saying, is just getting out there and letting the magic of synchronicity run into people and meeting,
100%.
you know?
100%. We're all, if we allow ourselves to see humanity differently, to see humanity as, I guess, like Wayne Dyer would have said, bless his soul, that we are in a body, we're spirits living in a body as opposed to a body that has a spirituality.
Right.
If we had more sort of support as a culture on listening, to internally being able to really listen in the moment to what's really what's happening with somebody else, to read their online dating profile and be able to not check off the points, but to sense, oh, what that really meant is something deep inside this person that they're showing with their words, but I'm able to sense this is what's really happening, and I could sense what's really happening to that person. It's not going on.
Right.
It's not going on, and it's extremely sad, and it leads to us relying on systems that are killing us in small ways and in big ways. I mean, I've given marital therapy for over a decade, and to see what's going on, again, I'm not a researcher, but I've studied the research. But the research that I've studied and what I've seen anecdotally inside the clients that I've seen, like, there's a universe of pain going on inside relationships all over. There is power dynamics that are completely out of alignment with nature. And there is emotional activity. There are people who are living together, shut down to each other. People who should feel alive that are not, because of the system of their family of origin is they've bought into the identity that the family of origin has given them. It's just across the board that we're not understanding the soul. We're not understanding the soul and living by the soul. And I think Kerouac was so great at wanting to express the innocence of his soul and the kindness of the people the hobos and even the cops that would stop, whatever it was, like every character, whether it was a good character or bad, are there good characters and bad characters in Kerouac books? It's not like that. He just was able to convey in the moment, in spite of the hardness of the moment, in spite of, I'm sleeping on the first scene of Dharma Bums, he's on a train sleeping next to a bum. It's a painful thing. Who wants to do that? And yet Kerouac is able to sort of give us this formula into understanding compassion, into understanding sympathy. When he was on the famous video of Kerouac with Steve Allen.
Yeah, I love that. And they playing the piano and doing the spoken word.
And reading parts of On the Road. He might be reading some other stuff than On the Road. I can't remember. But Steve Allen asked him, how do you explain, what does the word beat mean? And Kerouac goes, sympathy. And wow, there are other audios of Kerouac talking about listening to the beat, the slaves on the slave ship rowing to the sound of the beat. The beat was the rhythm behind jazz, was the rhythm behind his language, and it's the rhythm behind suffering. Is very much the beat was a way of him trying to express that suffering is happening to a beat, to the beat of music, to the beat of the blues. And that was his way of expressing it. And the road gives us that ability to connect to the beat of our own suffering, and the road sort of moves it into sympathy. And it's right.
That was beautiful, Michael. That's going to be a clip that I outtake from this and put out, man. That was really beautiful, man. And I totally agree with you. I've made the video talking about how I don't think it's good to glorify Jack's eventual alcoholism and some of the issues that he
Of
had.
course
But
not.
by no means does that change the fact that I think, number one, he's one of my favorite authors of all time, period, hands down. And I read a lot of books and have a lot of authors that I love. But also, number two, he had such a, I actually don't think he could handle the level of sympathy and empathy that I felt. I think it might have contributed to some of his problems because he was just so tuned in to the suffering of the world. And
Right.
but
Right.
it was beautiful that a guy and like the other thing that's interesting about Jack, I mean, he was a great athlete in high school and stuff. Like he was a manly man, and yet he was not afraid to look at the heartbreak of the world and to put his soul into it. You know,
You're hitting really powerful things. You could look at Kerouac's biography, that there's a real blending of the masculine and the feminine expressing itself through Jack. And then to your point about his, his awareness of the suffering in the world, I think you could argue that once the world found out about him, say with the printing of On the Road, and then when all these other novels that came out, that he wasn't expecting that the suffering was going to wind up attacking him or engulfing him. He's the first sort of virtual reality star in a way.
That's a good point, man.
Think about it, right? That Kerouac comes out with this breakthrough novel and then he can't go anywhere. That's kind of what Big Sur was about. Big Sur starts out with him on the train going back to San Francisco, getting in the drink, and then he's got to hide. And Ferlinghetti, I forget the name of Ferlinghetti's character, but gets him, to his house over at Big Sur. And he's sitting with the donkeys and he's sitting with, the bugs and just being. And that's what he needed, because he couldn't be anywhere, and anywhere he could be would just, drink was his way of functioning. So that's why for writing this next book and seeing it very cinematically, I'm like, I'm not trying to say, okay, everybody go be a drunk like Kerouac. That's the farthest thing that I want.
Right.
To sort of embody him as a resurrected figure, as this like resurrected American figure. It's like taking the writing, like don't let the writing associate with the writer. Like so many writers and drunks, Hemingway, whatever, and it's like associated with alcoholism or with addiction. I said, let me take the writing and turn the writing into this idealized figure.
Right.
And just like, how can we have somebody that embodies the sympathy that we all need? And that's what I'm like using Jack for that character, but I think he'd go along with it, I hope.
No, dude, I love that, man. And that's, that last video I made, I had like 30 followers, and half of them were like my family. So I didn't think anybody would really watch that video. And afterwards I felt like I wanted to make clear that I think dangerous when you glorify the negative aspect, Jack's alcoholism, but that does not diminish at all that I think he's one of the most amazing people out there, and he is somebody to emulate the best aspects of his philosophical and empathetic spirituality. Like I love Jack Kerouac, man. I love him. So
when you hear the other beats talk about him, like, do you know there's the video of him on firing line of Kerouac drunk out of his mind on
when Ed Sanders is on there and Ginsberg is in the audience.
He's interviewed by William F. Buckley.
Right.
And Ginsberg has a video talking about that. It's great. I don't know if you've seen it, but
Ginsberg, I have not seen that.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. But Ginsberg is an interview with Ginsberg talking about that interview of Jack. Ginsberg was in the audience. Ginsberg was like enabling him, like he in a way emotionally enabling him. But Ginsberg saw what you're saying, like Kerouac was drunk, but he saw Kerouac's humanity and what Kerouac was trying to convey through the interview. Like there's this moment where this is the height of the Vietnam War. It's like 1968. It's a year before Kerouac dies. And there's a part of the interview where William F. Buckley is looking to Kerouac for his, what's your opinion about the Vietnam War? Well, it's sort of, the question is sort of framed in a way as if it's as if the whole hippie movement is against it. And you had the lead, the guy, what's the name again?
Ed Sanders.
Ed Sanders is there. So it's just like framing Kerouac and putting him in with the sort of anti-Vietnam hippies.
Right.
And Kerouac didn't really have an opinion on it. Kerouac was like, well, they all want our Jeeps.
Right. Yeah. That he says that like twists everybody's mind up.
Exactly. It was just like, Buckley just got hit in the head by a Zen lunatic.
Right.
I didn't know really what to do with it. And so there's a video of Ginsberg explaining that Kerouac was just not a fit for that, was not a fit for those questions, but really had this whole humanistic, almost humorous attitude to the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I do want to see that, because I did feel like Jack kind of showed his ass a little bit, in a lot of that, just because he looked, rightfully or wrongfully, he looked like a washed up drunk, and just
red-faced drunk. He was drunk out of his mind. Ginsberg said that he didn't want to do the interview, but he was such a good person that he said, I need to do it because they asked me. So compassionate drunk Jack was like, well, I'm going to do it because they want me, so I'll do it.
Yeah, that's
he didn't pull any celebrity punches. I'm out of this interview. He didn't do anything.
Right. No, yeah, what a great dude. But yeah, man, so we'll get back to your work, back to your book, sure. Man. So this is when you're taking on a new client for psychotherapy, do you is this something like on the front end you say like, this is my style, or just something that kind of evolves over the course?
Great question. I've had to learn a lot about that. I realized that what I do is so different. There's not a framework for it. So I make it more of a back end thing. So what I do, the main tool that I have in giving my coaching is called mirroring. So mirroring is a communication technique that really focuses on active listening. It was developed for couples so that the couples, instead of fighting with each other, they'll slow down. One person is the sender, the other is the receiver, and the receiver mirrors back exactly what the sender heard. So it sort of is this meditative, transformational listening exercise. And when I work with a new client, we're going to start there. We're going to start with them communicating, and then I'll, maybe ask them to mirror some things so that they feel what's going on deeply in their own feeling states, start being more revealed by slowing down the conversation, going into deeper listening, and they're able to access either releasing negative feelings, or once they release negative feelings, they could kind of hear a quiet that gives them a wisdom or a clarity or an acknowledgement or an appreciation that's there through the process of the active listening. So that's usually when I get a client in the beginning. And then I have this gathering every August now. I call it the Sacred Solo Online Retreat. I'm almost done with the webpage for it. It'll be out by like today or tomorrow. And what we do is we take a week. So the clients or other people who want to get online on a Zoom meeting. And so it goes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night. And through that, we develop a question that helps them sort of focus what their deeper desires are wanting, and helps them to sort of clear beyond the immediacy of whatever negativity or systemic blockages are happening in their life, work, relationship, whatever. And that question becomes the blueprint of a journey. And so they go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then planning it. And then the weekend, everybody goes. So the last time we did this, we had people here in California and we had people in New York, but they went all the way up to Oregon, all the way up to, Southern California. We had people in New York going to Pennsylvania, people in New York going to upstate New York. Somebody, I think, went to Vermont, and all of them then came back after the weekend. And then we have one more class on Sunday. We call it the graduation class, but that's really like where they share their experience of their journey. And then one, we had the last one we went, we had a fellow, he had loss in his life. He had trauma in his life, and he drove from Arcata down to San Jose. So it's like a 6-hour drive. And he's telling me about, he went as low as he could and he went as high as he could. He went and immersed himself in water and then climbed a mountain. And then along the way, he's like, he saw, various rare animals. I can't remember the animals he saw, but he was like telling me all these connections, like one-on-one connections with animals in nature. It's brought him this deep sense of peace, coming out of this difficult relationship, sort of cleared all that. We had somebody in New York who he'd done numerous solo travels with me. And on that trip, he drove from New York down to Atlantic City, New Jersey. So like a 3-hour drive by himself. Also, he wanted to get as high as possible. So he just went on the top of a building, and then he went back down and he did like axe throwing somewhere. Right. So it's like these heightened moments. Another important teacher of mine, I don't know, if you're familiar with him, but Alejandro Jodorowsky, filmmaker and tarot reader from Chile.
Actually, I think I've heard that
he's like my main guy.
Okay.
And he's created a field of study called psychomagic, where what the person is doing is, as opposed to doing talk therapy, they're performing acts, the acts that are symbolic, and that the subconscious will sort of speak the language of symbolic, like dream imagery, but they're doing it. So for him, throwing the axe was that sort of like power, claiming of power. Even just the act of leaving and getting on the road, the subconscious is going, what's happening here? We're not used to any of this. We're dealing with symbols. What do you mean leaving? What do you mean? I had a moment where this is in 2016. So the kids were in California. I was sort of playing out the rest of New York and preparing myself for a life where I was going to move. Okay. So I take a solo, and this is a longer story than maybe I want to do. The moment that I knew that me and my beloved ex-wife were going to split happened on Bob Marley's birthday in Jamaica at Bob Marley's museum on the top of a mountain. I won't get into the details about it, but that was the moment that I knew we were splitting. Okay. Cut to years later, we were already split, and I'm doing a solo where I'm leaving everything behind, and I'm headed to my first outdoor spiritual festival where I was a teacher, which was like a big thing. So I'm like, I'm going to leave everything behind and I'm going to go. Okay. So what happens? I get on the road and I see a license plate, and the license plate was it just was like a date. It said 207. I'm like, 207? That's Bob Marley's birthday. That's right. Like immediately, I was like, when do you see license plates like that? Whatever. Immediately I get on the road and I see that, which takes me back to this whole moment where the whole marriage broke down and all that. Okay. I get on the highway. I see another license plate. It said 208. No, it just, it's like, it just seems to happen that when you combine the leaving, the intentionality, and the movement, that we're in a heightened state, and either we're noticing stuff that's always there in the heightened state, or we're bringing it to us in the heightened state. Like the heightened state is putting us unconsciously into this, make a turn here, go straight there, go to this place, boom, you're going to meet Michelle Obama or whatever. But it's really all just about saying yes to ourselves and entering a state of movement. And that seems to just attract it all.
That is so fascinating, because there's people in the paranormal research, which I'm not huge into, but I've had periods where I was really fascinated by it. Also overlaps with shamanic traditions, where they are really into the liminality, is what they call it, is these spaces in between spaces, including people who are in between times in their life. They tend to have more paranormal or spiritual experiences. And it overlaps exactly with what you just said, which is you get yourself out there, you break yourself out of the usual routine, put yourself in this liminal motion, and life comes at you in a different way than it does when you are
100%. 100%. I'm hardly an expert in the paranormal. Okay. I've had lots of experiences in deeply spiritual environments, mostly environments where there's training and learning in martial arts, in Jewish spirituality, in Zen Buddhism, but I haven't been in anything. I haven't had training in past life type stuff. I hadn't had training in any of that, but I am absolutely a believer that we're always interacting with the non-physical. The physical and the non-physical are always blending and interacting. In so many of my journeys, it just was so apparent that that was going on. It was unbelievable, because of what would manifest. There's a moment in the book. I'm 18. My father is this mentally ill man, and I just can't handle him. I had come out of this terrible psychotherapist for 3 years that had totally re-traumatized me. And I'm alone wandering all over Europe. I don't know, like, what am I doing? I'm terribly scared, but I kind of figured it out. By week 3, I wound up standing next to Greg LeMond, the cyclist who won the Tour de France that year. He won it it was the greatest comeback ever in Tour de France history. And here I am, I found the Tour de France, it boom, 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 everybody goes right past you on their bikes. And I'm like, wow, that was great, but I want more. And I walk down, and the next thing you know, I'm standing next to Greg LeMond being interviewed on French television in French. And I'm like, where's Waldo? Like, it's like, how do you create a memory like that? It is unbelievable to have that happen.
Yeah, that is really weird, man. That is cool. I'm interested with your Jewish tradition. Do you study Kabbalah at all, or?
Yeah, so I lived in Israel for a year. Talk about solo journey.
I just have to say real quick, that's my number one bucket list destination. I really want to go to Israel.
It is. Here's Israel in a nutshell right here. Okay. I leave the old city. I was living in the old city of Jerusalem, which is amazing and trippy and ancient and, all of it. And I'm getting on a bus to go to downtown Jerusalem, which is like happy and hectic and merchants and food and music and all this stuff. Okay. More secular than the old city is really religious, and the new city is much more secular. All right. I get on a bus. I'm sitting on the back of the bus. I have to the right of me just like this serious Orthodox Jewish man with the curls and the beard, wearing all black, just this figure, right? And on the other side of me is this Arab man, probably a Bedouin, wearing a keffiyeh with the the round rope and the sort of drapery around his neck, and wearing these robes, and he had a cane. And I'm sitting like, here's like the 2,000-year war that I'm like sort of sitting next to. And the Israeli driver, puts on Johnny Cash.
What? No way.
This is Israel. This is what it is. So I'm sitting here in the middle of this like biblical moment, listening to
with Johnny Cash going
down in a burning ring of fire. Just totally trippy. It is like everything in Israel is hyper condensed, hyper intense, political, confusing, sexy, alive, everything in every moment, with humor everywhere. Dark, just dark, intense humor, and suffering everywhere. Where there are bombs, where all the time. I mean, not as much now as when I was in the 90s. It was a pretty heightened time, but I was never scared. I was never scared. It just is hot. It's the whole place is hot and amazing and alive and active and mysterious and crazy.
Man, that sounds like exactly what I want to see. Like I couldn't believe the Garden of Gethsemane is a place you can actually go to. I had no idea that you can.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. And there's so many places in the Christian tradition that you could just get right to.
That's amazing, man. I by the way, I asked you about Kabbalah because I love Kabbalah. I actually just got the Zohar, man, which is the biggest single book I've ever purchased in my entire life. Right? It is like massive.
They talk from the Jewish tradition. I spent 6 weeks at an Orthodox yeshiva. So I was at a men's yeshiva. I was 26, and that is, a very, very intense place of Jewish study, where you're mostly, the core curriculum is the Talmud, meaning the Talmud is the Torah is like the 5 books of Moses, which would be like the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And then the Talmud is the oral law, meaning that the legal, the 613 laws of mitzvahs, of doing good deeds in Judaism from a Jewish context, are then explained in the Talmud and argued over in the Talmud, over like the 1st century BC rabbi against the 5th century AD rabbi says, you know, keeping the Sabbath means this, and the other rabbi says keeping the Sabbath means that. And so then you have these hundreds of, you know, mostly rabbinical students, which I was not, that are all in this hall studying, cracking their heads open over these legal spiritual documents. The Kabbalah, from that perspective, the Kabbalah is seen as this higher level version of understanding Jewish life and Jewish law that you're theoretically not supposed to study until 20 years in of studying Talmud. But that's not from the perspective, you know, anybody can study, Madonna can study Kabbalah. But, you know, from that perspective, they're like, not till you're ready, you know, right. Young Padawan kind of thing. Right.
No, I actually love that, though, about the Jewish tradition. I love how seriously they take it. I mean, I think it's amazing. It's in the modern world, for people to still take it that seriously is, to me, an amazing and beautiful thing. And I love it, man. I love Jewish culture. I love Jewish religion. I just love it, man.
Great. The third chapter of the Old Testament from the perspective of Judaism, of the Torah, is named Lech Lecha. So the third portion is the introduction of Abraham. So it's basically like Adam and Eve, then Noah, and then Abraham. But the title of his introductory chapter is Lech Lecha. And that means like go to yourself. So what that is representing is Abraham being told by God, like, don't believe in false idols and leave this place where you were born and go where I'll take you. Go. I'm going to send you to the land of Israel. Okay. But that concept of Lech Lecha, go to yourself. That's exactly what I'm trying to teach people.
Oh shit, it is, man.
It's totally so like cool. Go and find yourself out there. Yeah. So I am absolutely drawing on all of the, you know, Kerouac, but so many, certainly Zen and Taoist type learnings, but all kinds of stuff in Judaism that I'm trying to interweave into the whole thing. Judaism is like the best personal development program there is around. Really, there's so much about Judaism is about your personal character, you know, like doing these laws and good deeds, but to sort of find your own personal character inside the going of the actions.
No, yeah, I can see that, man. I follow rabbis on YouTube, and the wisdom that they share is just it's amazing, man. It's amazing. But
a lot of deep stuff.
Spilled over an hour. I'm sorry I kept you longer.
This is wonderful.
All right, cool, man. Cool.
Oh, this is fantastic. So I'll just tell your listeners that if they're interested, they can get the Zen of Solo Travel book. Just go to the zenofsolotravel.com.
Oh, it'll be in the description below the
perfect
video.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then all the other stuff is going on, but if they go to michaeljasonsherman.com, I have to update the website. But all the, you know, the coaching and workshops and retreats is all going to be up on there. So
in addition to the book that you've been working on for 3.5 years, do you have any other projects that you might be dropping other than the travel?
The whole thing, I have coaching clients, and then I give these retreats in February, online retreats in February and in August. So the August one is for solos, and that's coming up. And then I'm going to just get back to the YouTube channel so I'm able to convey what the work is about in my videos, and working on the new book and getting it out and moving it forward. It's pretty much it.
That's awesome, man. Michael, seriously, man, I think what you're doing is so cool, man. And
I appreciate that very much. I really enjoy your energy.
And I've loved this conversation, man. Hopefully we can talk again in the future.
Absolutely.